हेलो योगेश, हाउ आर यू? गुड टू सी यू। आपका माइक म्यूट है।
Hi Yogesh, good evening. How are you doing?
गुड इवनिंग, गुड इवनिंग।
मैं अभी बता रहा था एमडी एसएफएसी को कि आपने प्रोक्योरमेंट सेंटर्स चालू किए हैं। नई जो केंद्रीय नीति का सबसे पहले आपने ही कदम बढ़ाया है उसको ऑपरेशनलाइज करने का।
जी मैम को नमस्कार।
नमस्कार योगेन जी, आपके मैसेज मुझे आते रहते हैं। मैं
जी मैम को बीच बीच में
हर बार मैं रिप्लाई नहीं दे पाती हूँ, लेकिन मैं पढ़ती पूरा हूँ आपका मैसेज।
थैंक यू मैम।
जी, बढ़िया, अच्छी खबर है कि बताया जो शर्मा जी बता रहे थे, प्रवेश जी, कि आप
जी हम लोगों ने 5-6 सेंटर मैम शुरू कर दिए हैं, अभी ये नंबर और बढ़ा रहे हैं।
आपका अर्लीस्ट रिएक्शन क्या है इसमें प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी को लेकर के?
ये ओवरऑल इम्पैक्ट तो होगा मैम, अभी थोड़ा सा ग्रेजुअल, जिस तरह से लोगों ने थोड़ा जब कह रहे थे ना, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट थोड़ा इसका पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज तो बना दिया है, तो अभी पॉलिटिकल इशू होने से लोगों में फियर क्रिएट किया जा रहा है, स्यूडो फियर। तो वो अभी है कुछ समय के लिए, तो लोग थोड़ा हेजिटेट कर रहे हैं। कुछ केसेस में ऐसा होता है कि पेमेंट आएगा, ये आएगा मंडी में, तो अभी मंडी के प्रति थोड़ा सा लोगों को है, बट ग्रेजुअली आ रहे हैं लोग, अभी थोड़ा सा वेट एंड वॉच कर रहे हैं। और बीच में अभी क्या है, प्राइस को लेकर मंडियां जिसमें बंद कर दिया था, मध्य प्रदेश में भी करीब 14 दिन मंडी, 14 डेज यहाँ भी बंद थी, तो लोग थोड़ा सा डरे हुए थे, फार्मर थोड़ा सा कंफ्यूज हो रहे थे। बट ये बात है, उनकी ये समझ में आ रहा है कि अब ऑप्शन मिला, क्योंकि मंडी बंद नहीं हो रही, ये जो र्यूमर क्रिएट किया कि मंडी बंद हो रही, ये नहीं हो रहा है, और उनको और सारे चॉइस मिल रहे हैं, तो लोग उसको लेके पॉजिटिव है। ओवरऑल वो एक पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा, बट किसान उसमें आगे आ रहे हैं, उनको फायदा होगा, तो दे आर क्वाइट पॉजिटिव।
तो यथावत बनी रहेंगी ना, मंडियों को थोड़ा ना कोई कह रहा है कि बंद कर दो, यहाँ व्यापार नहीं होगा। जो वहाँ पे हो रहा था, जो वहाँ जाना चाहता है वो स्वतंत्र है।
एग्जैक्टली उनको तो एक और चॉइस मिल रही है अपना बेचने के लिए, और मार्केट मिल रहे हैं।
और एक
हम
जो
लोगों को जैसे चॉइस है एज बायर्स, कि हम चाहें तो किसी बड़ी दुकान से खरीदारी कर लें, चाहे हम अपनी नुक्कड़ की दुकान से खरीदारी करें, चाहे हम ऑनलाइन खरीदारी करें। हमको खरीदने की जैसे स्वतंत्रता है, वैसी स्वतंत्रता बेचने वालों को भी होनी चाहिए।
जी मैम, यही मेरे गांव में, सागर का एक गांव है, आज वहाँ चुनाव भी है उस गांव में, वहां पे चल रहा, तो मैं वहां पे गया था, तो सेम यही वर्ड था कि अगर मैं ऐसे भोपाल में या कहीं शहर में रहता हूँ, मेरे पास 50 दुकानें खरीदने के लिए, आपके पास चॉइस केवल एक मंडी क्यों रखी गई है कि आप अपना माल, आपके पास भी 50 खरीदने वाले, 50 बेचने, आपके पास भी होना चाहिए। तो लोगों के समझ में आ रहा है, बट क्या है, लोगों ने ये कहा कि लोग पैसे लेके भाग जाते हैं, बाहर खरीदी में होता है, इस तरह से थोड़ा सा उसको लोग मिसगाइड कर रहे थे। बट वो मैम अल्टीमेटली तो इसका पॉजिटिव रिजल्ट आने वाला है, और लोग तो काफी पॉजिटिव है।
पेमेंट के सेफगार्ड्स देखने पड़ेंगे, इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि पेमेंट्स कैसे हो रहे हैं, क्या हो रहा है, उसके सेफगार्ड्स तो बनाने ही पड़ेंगे। परंतु मैं सोचती हूँ कि वो एक सरकारी तंत्र से मुक्त होकर के, अगर वो अपने आपस में साझेदारी में, कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल भाषा में बोलें तो, कि आप बिटवीन द बायर एंड द सेलर जो डील होती है वो एनफोर्सेबल होती है ना, हर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट की तरह वो एनफोर्सेबल होती है।
जी
कानून बने हुए हैं उसके, इसमें भी प्रावधान किया गया है कि एसडीएम लेवल कमेटी में, हाँ, तो उसमें निस्तारण होगा। तो मैं नहीं सोचती कि कोई भी नया सिस्टम आप लाते हो तो उसमें कुछ तो टीदिंग ट्रबल होता ही है ना।
जी एग्जैक्टली। और एक आध केस तो मैं मंडी में भी इस तरह हो रहा था, मंडी के खरीदी में भी अभी वही हम लोग बात कर रहे थे कि एक दो केस तो साल में होते हैं, हर जगह होते हैं, मतलब डिस्पाइट ऑफ योर ऑल बैरियर्स और रिस्ट्रिक्शंस, एक आध तो हो जाएंगे। तो अभी मंडी में भी हो रहे हैं, अभी भोपाल में, उज्जैन में ऐसे केस हुए हैं, एक दो मंडी में होते रहते हैं कि लोग ज्यादा क्वांटिटी से खरीद लिए, उनका पेमेंट फंस गया, फिर वो डिफाल्टर हो गए, तो ऐसे केसेस होते हैं। बट वो एक्सेप्शनल केस होते हैं, उससे पूरा जनरलाइज तो नहीं किया सकता कि बाहर की खरीदी, क्योंकि बाहर के ट्रेड में भी है। ये सही है कि जो नए हैं, कोई बाहर से अगर बायर आ रहे हैं, तो वो बायर को लेकर के थोड़ा सा एक मैकेनिज्म अभी है कि उनको किस तरह से, ऐसा कहना जाए कि कोई बोलते हैं कि नाइट किस तरह के कुछ लोग आते हैं और ऐसा चले, तो उसमें थोड़ा सा है। बट वो जो मैकेनिज्म बनाया है कि अल्टीमेटली अगर पैन कार्ड होल्डर है और एसडीएम वगैरह, तो लॉ जो है, कई सारे कानून ऑलरेडी वहां पे एग्जिस्ट कर रहे हैं, तो उससे लोग फार्मर्स के इंटरेस्ट को तो आसानी से प्रोटेक्ट किया जा सकता है।
Okay, Yogesh, we'll continue this. We have made the session live, so we'll start this. Surya Kumar ji is still awaited, but since Neelkamal has already joined us, Anisha, let's start the session.
Good evening to everyone and welcome one and all to today's discussion, NAFPO Dialogues on Visioning the Next Level of Growth for FPOs. We are very privileged to have the leadership of 10,000 FPO program on this important conversation. I join all our friends from the FPO ecosystem who are participating in this discussion on Zoom, Facebook, and other channels to extend a warm welcome to Madam Neelkamal Dabari, IAS Managing Director, SFAC, Mr. Surya Kumar, Deputy Managing Director, NABARD, and Mr. Pravesh Sharma, our Chairperson, National Association for Farm Producer Organization, NAFPO. The structure we have today is that in the first part, we will have a conversation of Mr. Pravesh Sharma with Madam Darbari and Mr. Surya Kumar. We are looking at the emerging role and significance of FPOs in light of the recent agriculture reforms, as also the 10,000 FPO program. In the second part, we will have interactions of the panel comprising of a cross-section of the FPO ecosystem. We have a stakeholder panel with Mr. Yogesh Trivedi, Mr. Balakrishnan, Professor Shambhu, and Mr. Anish Kumar with us, and we will also take up queries from the participants in the end. We welcome you all again. I would now like to quickly introduce NAFPO. It is a multi-stakeholder owned organization working towards creating an enabling ecosystem support for FPOs.
Anisha, why can't I see you?
Yeah,
Why can't I see you? Yeah, better. Now better. Yeah.
Yeah. So NAFPO is currently providing missing links to the FPO ecosystem and is largely playing the role of identifier, linker, and enabler to strengthen FPOs. It has been actively participating in giving voice to the FPO community in various forums. Some initiatives taken up by NAFPO include online HR marketplace for professional management support to FPOs, an e-learning management system, which has been organized to bring quality training content on one platform for all stakeholders. We have just concluded a 3-part comprehensive and customized capacity building training for POPIs, RIs, and CBBOs, key personnel at FPOs, directors, delivered in partnership with Vikas Anvesh Foundation. We have customized solution for FPOs to cover end-to-end price risk management, delivered in partnership with Credible. I would also like to update that NAFPO has planned to bring the first state of FPO report before the end of this year. I will now hand over to Pravesh, sir.
Thank you, Anisha, for this very succinct introduction to NAFPO. And I, on behalf of NAFPO, also extend a very warm welcome to Neelkamal ji and thank her for joining us today. We're expecting Mr. Surya Kumar to also be with us shortly. I also welcome the distinguished panel, Professor Shambhu Prasad from IRMA, Mr. Balakrishnan from Vritti, Mr. Yogesh Trivedi, CEO of the Madhya Bharat Consortium of FPOs from Bhopal, and Mr. Anish Kumar of TRIF. I also see more than 160 participants who have joined here on this channel on Zoom, and I know many more have joined on the Facebook and other channels which are beaming this dialogue live. I think it's a great privilege for us to be hosting this very widely representing stakeholder group today. And I think the subject could not be more timely. And I think some of the players who have very deep insights into the entire FPO ecosystem are present here today. So it makes for a very rich 90 minutes of discussion. If I could add a personal note to this introduction, November 2010 is when I joined in Neelkamal ji's place as MD SFAC. So it's a 10-year journey of the FPO sector. And many of the people who are on the panel, but also who are, I know, present in the attendees, are actually those who have helped to bring this idea to such a state of development today. My previous experience in grassroots institution building was what I saw in the MFI sector from the late 90s onwards. And I can say that the pace of acceleration, the momentum that has been seen in the FPO sector in 10 years, took almost 20 years in the MFI sector. So we had always thought that as the numbers grow towards a critical mass, the policy response will also become more and more diverse and supportive. And that's exactly when I look back on the last 10 years, I can have some satisfaction in seeing that the ecosystem has attracted a very diverse range of very talented players. Dozens of new institutions, both from civil society, the private sector, and of course from the government sector, have joined this movement. NABARD was initially hesitant to support FPOs. That's not a criticism. I think wisely they wanted to watch to see how this, but once they were convinced, from about 2013-14, NABARD has been a very great champion of this whole FPO idea, and today is a very major player in the sector. So again, I thank all of you for your support, and I look forward to another decade of intensive work and for further growth and consolidation of this sector. The idea of these dialogues is truly to help to build the understanding of different stakeholders, both who are in the policy domain, who are in the operational domain, representatives of FPOs, of civil society organizations, of academia. And we're very fortunate that the sector has attracted such a diverse and rich, and I would say highly talented pool of stakeholders and workers who have contributed immensely through their ideas and their work. In the first part of this dialogue, we will have a very, wide-ranging discussion with Madam Neelkamal Darwari and Surya Kumar ji as he joins. And then the rest of the panel will also open up to share their views and perspectives. And in the end, we'll try and pick up a few of the questions that the attendees can send on the Q&A feature of the Zoom. And we'll see if time permits, we shall certainly take up a few of those questions at the end. So with this, could I, Neelkamal ji, first address the issue to you, sitting in the position that you are as the nodal agency for the FPO sector in the country, leading the next wave of 10,000 FPOs to be developed in the next 3 years. There's an Azim Premji Foundation report issued very recently, which has estimated that the number of registered FPOs in country are now around 7,300. So that's an astonishing number. And another 3,000 odd are actually under the process of formation. So you already have a pipeline of 10,000 plus FPOs, and an additional 10,000 are coming up. What, in your view, would be the, as you see, the top 3 issues that you think should be addressed or you are addressing, which would enable this large cohort of FPOs to achieve the kind of goals and objectives that they set out to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Pravesh ji, for organizing this dialogue. And we've had a lot of, actually, for the benefit of some of the others, I would like to remind that we've actually had a lot of dialogue in the past 2 years since we started thinking along, having a kind of a mission approach towards the creation of FPOs. And like a, जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं, एक मुहिम छिड़ने का जब निर्णय लिया गया, तो there was a lot of advocacy work that people did. I mean, including Parvesh, he was involved in so much of the dialogue that we had. So many of the others sitting here, we had constant meetings, etc., and brainstorming sessions as to how to push this. What really changed the game, I mean, we were having an SFAC, and I was, constantly with the ministry trying to push for creation of more and more FPOs. But really the whole thing changed once this 10,000 FPOs thing was announced in the Sankalp Patra of the ruling government, and then of course the budget announcement came, for which we all of us worked for having that announcement. But and so therefore we now have a situation where we have 7,300 plus 3,000, 10,000 already somewhere at various stages of development, and 10,000 absolutely brand new ones to be created now. So we have my God, 20,000 number of FPOs that we can envisage in the next 5 years. What I have seen in the last little less than 2 years that I have been at SFAC is that while regionally and cluster wise and commodity wise, the issues faced by FPOs may differ, but there are certain commonalities which shriek out for attention. And first and foremost among them would be the marketing linkages. I think, wherever you find an FPO doing well, you study that, you realize they are doing well because they have got some kind of a link with the market, with a buyer, with a direct buyer. The whole game changes once you have assured market available with the least cost to the FPO and assured prices and assured linkages to that. But even before that, you have the issue of funding. So many of the FPOs who have spent hours and hours and so much of motivational leaders who are trying to forge them together, whether they come through poppies of NABARD or through the resource institutions of SFAC or even by private initiative, they spend so much of energy and man hours in mobilizing farmers, and then they get them to a point where they are convinced about the benefit of it, and then they form an aggregation under the Companies Act or whatever. However, most FPOs that I have encountered, I have a problem in terms of getting funds from the banks. There is this working capital situation where you really, and I'm not even talking about the capital investment in the FPOs. I'm just talking about making the mayor go. Is it okay to speak in English or should I switch to Hindi or mix?
Please feel free to speak in any language. I think we have a lot of participants from the south also, so a mix of English Hindi would help.
So what I feel was कि अगर institutions हैं जैसे cooperative societies या banks हैं या आपके अन्य प्रकार के जो NBFCs हम बोलते हैं जिनको, अगर finance की link हो जाती है, कहीं से उनको arrangement हो जाती है, हालांकि उनकी NBFCs की अभी भी हम ये देख रहे हैं कि rate of interest high है, लेकिन वो एक स्ट्रक्चरल चीज़ है जिसके बारे में अलग से विस्तार से वार्ता की जा सकती है. But typically availability of funds closer to home at low costs, not very high costs, and then recycling of the same. I mean, there are issues in terms of financing for the FPOs. Collateral नहीं होता. हमारी स्कीम है, SFAC की स्कीम है, credit guarantee scheme, which is meant for FPOs. कि आप बैंक से जाकर के you can get a loan without any requirement of collateral, because we are going to stand collateral and we will give the guarantee to the bank that in case the loanee defaults, then the government will make good the losses to the bank. लेकिन उसका ऑफ टेक बहुत कम है. वो स्कीम को आकर के 4 साल हो गया. In the first 3 years the off take was very limited. In this year when we picked it up, we did more than 4 times what had been done cumulatively till that point. Now we have done more than 4 or 5 times of that. Yet I think it is only a very very minuscule tip of the iceberg. जितना काम इस सेक्टर में हो सकता है, जितना हमारे पास में funds available हैं, we can really send these loans out to the field collateral free, विदाउट एनी कोलैटरल, जिसमें कि फार्मर के ऊपर या FPO के ऊपर बोझा नहीं आता है, उनको गिरवी रखने के लिए कोई आवश्यकता नहीं है. बट देयर इज एन इशू कि इसको कैसे करें. वी साइंड अ लॉट ऑफ MOUs विद द बैंक्स. वी हैव सम फ्रेश थिंकिंग इनटू मेकिंग इट अवेलेबल फॉर द NBFCs also, and the national level committee has recommended that also. But fact of the matter is that despite all the push that we gave and we signed MOUs with so many banks, the offtake is very limited. तो एक तरफ तो सरकार के पास में पैसा है, दूसरी तरफ में FPOs को रिक्वायरमेंट भी है, और तीसरी तरफ बीच में बैंक्स हैं, लेकिन वो फंडिंग नहीं हो पाती है, फाइनेंसिंग नहीं हो पा रही है. तो एक तो ये मुझे लगता है कि बहुत बड़ी एक रिक्वायरमेंट है, दैट हाउ टू मेक द 3 gel together and ensure that the FPOs are adequately funded. And third thing is infrastructure. Whenever we talk about, say, the new acts which have come up, and we say ki, okay, you can sell from the farm gate, but you really need infrastructure for that. And what is the kind of infrastructure that you need? You will need some basic sorting, grading, polishing machines to create a value for your product. You will need a collection center with some platform, you can of course do it in just in time basis, कि यहाँ से उठाया वहाँ पे रखा, but logistics and infrastructure will make a world of difference to the whole profitability factor. So as a quick call, I would say these are the three important concerns that I have, and and wherever these concerns have been addressed, one sees different results. I am so happy that the new schemes of the government, whether it is in terms of the 3 new acts which have come up, or the infrastructure development fund for agri infrastructure which has come, or even our SFACs, or rather the government's 10,000 FPO program, they will address these concerns. Even the credit guarantee scheme has been enhanced to like phenomenal. I think 2,500 crores is the kitty available for that between NABARD and NCDC. SFAC, of course, has its own scheme on that. So the requirement is to make more and more FPOs from these 10,000 which are now available and 10,000 which will come up to avail of these benefit schemes that have been launched by the government.
Thank you so much, Neelkamal. That was an excellent overview, and I couldn't have hoped for a better, I think, and coming from you, this makes so much sense. I began my work, and I used to crudely say that we are trying to address 3 objectives: how to get FPOs investments, markets, and technology. And I think you have summed it up very well with very cogent examples. Basically, those 3 challenges are really the top challenges that need to be addressed. And I think we could also not have a better timing of the entry of Mr. Suryakumar, Deputy Managing Director of NABARD. Welcome, Suryakumar ji.
Pardon me for being late. I just came out of that interview thing, so I was delayed by 20 minutes.
Namaskar, Suryakumar ji. Hope you're
Namaskar ji.
चलिए, तो I just finished speaking. Suryakumar ji, आपने मेरे golden words miss कर दिए. क्या करूँ?
I'm sorry. I think I'll ask my colleagues.
नहीं. We were just
sorry,
rising.
No, I think this is very timely. As I said, I was actually going to send a message to you saying that, I'm hoping that you will turn up in the next 1 minute, and you actually did, because my question really was to you next. I requested Neelkamal to give us her perspective on the top 3 challenges which she feels at this stage, after a decade of work, FPOs are facing to achieve their full potential. And she mentioned financing, she mentioned market linkages, and she mentioned infrastructure. Could I, from your point of view, as a very major promoter agency, financing agency, and as a sector champion, how do you see the state of the sector today, and what would you classify as the top 3 challenges which, if addressed, could help FPOs achieve their full potential?
So, good afternoon and namaskaram to all of you. So I think the primary challenge for the FPO is coming together for getting into business is a big challenge. Coming together when to do a watershed program, coming together to a microfinance like SHG program has been relatively easy. I think when we worked with both these programs at all the regional offices level, that was not a very difficult thing at all. Here, coming together to do a business, that little jump is causing a problem. This is consistently we have felt. In fact, Sunday I was talking to one FPO which is based in Mysore. I know them since very long. They're into very specialized thing called as chia seeds. The farmer leader who is the champion for that called Shantakumar ji was telling me we got now 100 tons of chia seeds. We don't know what to do, and the value of it has fallen down, and we need to keep it in such a dry place, otherwise they'll go away. Someone being a farmer leader, someone who could mobilize, someone who could get into an area which is so niche and still got into trouble, is an immense getting into the business is causing a problem for many natural resource management people. That is one big area which is a big thing. Understanding business is a major thing. And second thing, I would say, I will agree with what ma'am has said. Recently, I was talking to senior bankers in a training college of RBI called as CAFROL, which is based at Bombay. They were doing an online program. So the principal asked me, the ED Reserve Bank of India spoke before me, and then I was speaking. The principal asked me, you should talk something about the FPO. So I told him that is the reason I came here, and then I spent some time talking to, there were 45 senior people from across the country. They were saying, we don't understand what is FPO, and there is no such, we never heard anything like this. The governments are really not talking that language at the district level, at the state level. So then I told him, no, it's not like that. Now there is a 10,000 FPO committee, 10,000 FPOs are being formed, and there are several committees. That's what I told him. Then he asked me, sir, since NABARD subsidiary called NAB Kisan funded them, is there any default rate in FPO so far? I told him there is no default rate in FPO till now in the NAB Kisan's account. So he's saying that, sir, I think that is a nice news. If that is the case, we will start looking into it. Why I'm saying this point is, some more, while this was discussed in the SLBCs, some more what you call handholding is required to be done to the bankers. We are trying to do that. So I would put these two areas as more important areas in the FPOs. I would stay with these two.
Thank you, Suryakumar. I think you have added two very, very critical dimensions to Nilkamal's input.
Sir, my colleague wants to add one more point to it.
Please.
एक इशू है जिसके लिए नीलकमल मैम से भी हम लोगों की काफी डिस्कशंस हुई है in the recent past. Then we were basically trying to decide the criteria for selection of CBPOs. इसमें sir, actually, just to borrow my DMD's expression, we are essentially looking for a god, who will be effective both in social mobilization as also very effective in terms of understanding the market and linking the FPO with the market. So this is also a very critical challenge, the selection of the right kind of a CBPO. That would obviously be a challenge for each of us. I mean, SFSC, NABARD and NCDC and all other agencies also, because our experience has shown that unless the CBPO or the POPI or the RSI is very confident, I do not think they will be able to instill any amount of confidence in the FPOs per se. So that is a huge challenge. And the other challenge which I would like to, just extend the point which ma'am had mentioned a while back. So the whole issue is that on the one hand, we are saying that we are trying to link, with the aid of these marketing reforms which have taken place in the recent past, as also the FPOs being empowered to directly deal with the market. Sir, ये आजादी का डर भी है, ये fear of freedom. माने एक तरफ तो लगता है कि उन्हें empower कर दे, we should make them free to deal with the market. But do they feel confident enough to deal with the market, like sir was saying? I think that also is a very huge challenge which the FPO leaders will tomorrow be facing. So this also has to be ab initio instilled in the minds of the FPO board of directors as also the CEO, that they have to dream big. Unless they dream big, they will perhaps not be able to reach the scale which we are all expecting, and the government of India and all other agencies put together are trying to take them to. That's from my side, sir.
Thank you so much. I think both of you have really brought out a very, very important dimension, which is the role of the FPO as a, shall we say, body of a member-owned organization, a body representing social capital, but a body which actually needs to have a very profound business sense and market orientation. Fortunately, we have in the panel, and we shall hear him later, a representative of an FPO network, and we'll see what their ground level experiences are. But thank you, Suryakumarji and Nawaz, for these points. Before I get into, because we have both CSO, a civil society organization, as well as an FPO representative present. But before I come to them, I'm going to invite Professor Shambhu Prasad, who has been looking at this whole sector in a somewhat dispassionate way. So for him, the entire sector is, in a sense, equal. Some of us maybe are embedded in a certain vantage point in the sector. So some of our perspectives can tend to get a little biased. But I'm going to invite Shambhu Prasad ji to give us his perspective on the learnings that you have acquired in the last few years of your research, looking at FPOs, and what would you say in response to the 5 issues which Neel Kamal and Surya Kumar have brought out.
Thanks a lot, Pravesh ji, and it's a good opportunity to discuss with such a interesting set of people the issues of farmer producer organizations. And I think, this is a buzzword popularly made popular by Pravesh ji and others. And I think we are at an interesting stage of a case where actually many of us from the academia find ourselves behind much of the developments in the field. So some of the knowledge that we have learned, especially at IRMA on designing farmer collectives, has somehow not been able to be translated as is when we look at the new generation of organizations that have been set up in the 21st century with the kind of engagement with agricultural markets that are increasingly globalized, a time when, markets have also, commodity markets have been depressed at some level. So this focus on how can farmers' income be enhanced through this institutional mechanism is something of great interest. And I think we're probably not coming out as strongly is the case that an investment in a collective institution of farmers should be treated as a public good, and it probably has better returns than an investment in, say, individual loan waivers, which has been a response of public policy at some level. Having said that, I think our understanding of the cases are there's been a tremendous amount of growth of many of these organizations. We've had close to about 7,000, 8,000 of them in the last decade or so. And I think the sector has also grown a lot. It's attracted large numbers of people. But I think it's important now to try and look at the sector on specific issues like, say, finance for marketing and so on. And coming to this particular case of the, the new guidelines, I'd just like to share a bit of the kind of work we've tried doing with other organizations in trying to understand what this means to people who have been in this sector. So as soon as the guidelines were announced in July, at IRMA, in collaboration with NAFPO, we had conducted an e-survey to try and understand the perceptions of people who are involved in this sector. And this was between July 8th to about 21st or so. And what was interesting is that we shared the draft, guidelines that were there, and it's fairly elaborate, 52 pages of document. And what was exciting was the kind of engagement that the close to 50 odd people who responded. All of them read through the document at great length. And the questions that were there, some of it actually filling the whole questionnaire could have taken close to an hour, in some cases even more. But that's the kind of engagement that the sector is indicating at this point in time. So there was a great amount of engagement. Of the 56 people who responded, some individually, some through the electronic survey, what was interesting was over 40% of them, and a few of them are of course there today as well, have engaged with more than 10 FPOs. So they've had a fair amount of experience in dealing with FPOs in the past. And I think this rich set of knowledge is something that can help us in designing newer kinds of policies. So in a sense, there was some, excitement about the new policy that came through. There's a broad level of endorsement that it is interesting that the government of India is indeed planning to have this kind of an expansion of the scheme of FPOs going into another 10,000. And also at some level that some of the concerns that was there earlier has in some sense been addressed. One of which is to have a common, nomenclature, not one for NABARD, not another for SFAC, or the third for NCDC and so on. So in a sense, having an overall policy framework where all can be treated together is something that was very much welcome. The provision for a graded kind of investment for finance has also been welcomed. I think the Madam mentioned the idea of the credit guarantee scheme. There is still a fair amount of expectation that the credit guarantee scheme will work much better in this round. The offtake should be much higher. So broadly, there's been a certain amount of endorsement of the scheme. The idea of the numbers, some of them welcomed it because we've seen one or two case studies where the FPOs ended up trying to reach those numbers of 1,000 without a strong, robust business model in investing in the farmers. So the active members in an FPO and the actual members were quite different. Probably now, with the reduced numbers, maybe the FPOs are directed towards forming institutions that are much more robust. So that has also been welcomed. In the hilly areas, the relaxation has also been welcomed. Some of them working in those regions would have found it very difficult to get those kinds of numbers. And especially in terms of the matching grant. Of course, these numbers can increase to 1,000 or 4,000 or 5,000, depending on the commodities they're working with. So broadly speaking, in terms of the institutional structures, there were a few concerns, and I'd just like to mention some of those concerns before we take up for discussion a bit later. So in the institutional structures, one of the concerns was the representation of those organizations that have had considerable experience in the sector and who have been perhaps looking at the sector for a while. So the suggestion that came out reasonably strongly was at the national, district, state, and the district level, there should be space for non-governmental representatives with experience in this sector, and that's something that could be probably discussed a bit later. A very strong concern, and that's I think come out even in the question answers here, was the lack of clarity on the support structures that are likely to be available for the existing FPOs. And I think there's a certain silence about that in the document. Many of them invested a fair amount of time and energy in building these institutions. They are ready to go to the next stage, but somehow the new policy is not, very clear about what's going to happen to the existing FPOs. And I think that's a very strong kind of view that came through. Of course, there's also concerns raised about the one district, one product idea. So the expectation is that in places where it might make sense, it's something desirable, but this could reach to a situation where it could work against the normal logic of an FPO. In a sense, the FPO, and we've seen this experience, they're dealing with one commodity initially, then they're diversifying the risk into working on other commodities. So sometimes an excessive emphasis on one product may not work with, the kind of mitigation capabilities of the FPOs. That was one of the concerns. There's one element which we would like to have.
Shambhu, if you can wind up in about a minute, because I want to, I know, maybe you could also share this report with NAFPO, and we'll be happy to circulate a gist. But I thought we could keep the discussion going also. Thank you.
So the last point I'd like to mention is that on the ease of doing business, and I think there's a lot that probably needs to be done on this particular element, especially at the state level. There's been some encouraging news from the state of Telangana, where they have actually said that the state government has instructed, maybe they're going to come out with an order where the licenses that are required for FPOs to operate, the buyer-seller meets, etc., the government needs to play a much stronger role in that area. So broadly, I think I'd like to end with this point. We could take up more during the discussion.
Thank you, Shambhu. I know that your research is very comprehensive and it would be of great interest, especially to the two key organizations represented here. And that's what's going to bring me back to Neelkamal. And you heard both from NABARD and from Shambhu's findings that the role of this promoting organization is somehow critical in embedding the DNA of a successful FPO. So could you throw some light for the benefit of this large audience, not just the panel, but we have, as I said, more than 500 people through different channels listening to this conversation. What would you be able to share with us on the approach towards the partner organizations, whether you call them RIs or POPs or civil society organizations, the promoting organizations' role in this new project? If you could share some, some of the preparations or some of the perspectives on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this concern is very valid. I have to say this, because we have seen that there has been a lot of work which some grassroots organizations have been playing, and they have played in the last 5-10 years since the FPO movement started in terms of mobilization of farmers. One of the things which NABARD said was that mobilization itself towards the common cause of farmers coming together with a view to making creating a business model and having linkages, etc., that itself is difficult to conceptualize, and it's a little difficult for farmers to accept that kind of a model. So the difficulty starts from there, and then it moves on further down the road, in the sense that having formed an aggregated group of farmers, there is also the issue of now putting your resources together in terms of getting the necessary finances or the infrastructure, or even in bringing your produce together for marketing, aggregated marketing. These are issues, and what we envisaged through all the discussions we had, that was that there should be an organization which should be a little higher, a little better than what we've had in the past as an intermediary organization like the RIs or Popeyes. So a little better equipped, little having more depth in terms of human resources available with them, so that they can handhold and incubate the requirements of FPOs through the process of not only mobilization, but actually, processing, primary processing, then marketing and whatever. So the selection criteria which we laid down after very, very bitterly fought discussions between different stakeholders, and amicably settled, I have to say that also, was that we need to have an expert entity. I mean, we don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of what that entity will be, so long as it's a legal entity and it carries with it certain experts who would handhold the FPOs through the various stages. So a different expert for a different requirement. So you have a finance and banking expert, you have a marketing expert, you have a processing, you have an agronomist, and you have kinds of people who would in fact handhold an FPO and the member farmers through various processes, including stuff like compliance with the statutory requirements, whether it is an FPO registered under the Companies Act, or it is under the Cooperatives Act, or any other trust and societies, whatever. There are legal compliances, and so many times we have seen that the farmers, for lack of knowledge and awareness, falter, and they invite penalties, and because of the quantum of penalties involved, they fall by and they close shop, and then they, lack of enthusiasm, ye paisa lagana padega, you have to fill these fines, and then therefore there is the sense of bhai dur raho, that kind of a thing happens. I've met a few who have said कि हमारी तो penalty लग गई साहब, जितना हमने कमाया नहीं उससे ज़्यादा penalty लग गई. So that is one thing where we have felt that this is also an area of concern. So while on the one hand we have already taken it up with the Department of Ministry of Corporate Affairs to dilute some of the requirements of the FPOs. My letter to them has gone, and I have requested the Ministry of Agriculture also to take it up with the corporate affairs. From my side, I have sent a letter. So while on the one hand, we are trying to get these requirements toned down and get more benefits to the farmers, but on the other, we are going to create this support system of experts who will handhold farm FPOs through the various stages of doing business. So I think, we've never experimented with that before. We've only had these RIs who have mobilized the farmers, got them incorporated, got them to collect equity, and perhaps fill up the forms for SFAC benefit schemes or for NABARD benefit schemes. But really beyond that, the crux of the matter, as I have said earlier, is in the marketing. So, and they have done. I'm not saying they have not done or they are not capable of doing. People have done good work in terms of creating viable business plans, but not through that kind of a professional business orientation which is required in these advanced technological times, where anybody who has those sets of skills stand a better chance of success vis-a-vis those who don't have those skill sets. So I think that has been recognized and that has been built into the program, that you have the kind of CBBOs who will bring in this kind of expertise. If they don't bring in these expertise, then they will not be CBBOs for any one of us. And I hope the selection process, I can tell you what we have done so far in SFAC. We put up a CBBO EOI and we have received 330 applications from across the country. So people have understood the requirement. They have 330s at last count. They were still calculating the emails received. So that's what we have received. And I think NABARD is yet to, have you put in your EOI for CBBOs? I'm not sure. But if you have...
I'm going to ask Surya Kumar the same question, but yeah, please.
So you see, there is that much enthusiasm. I mean, as of now, if you ask me, SFAC has about 60 odd resource institutions. That's it. And we've been around for a while. And with one EOI, we have been able to elicit that much response and excitement that there's 330. Of course, the understaffed, people who, organizations that do not have the requisite expertise will be weeded out as per the terms and conditions of the EOI. But I'm expecting that the cream of the organizations will come up and they will handhold the FPOs in the strictest sense of the word and provide the necessary guidance for them to work. That was one. The other, what was the other point? Yeah, so CBBO selection is critical, I agree. And we have built in safeguards, we have built in expertise that is relevant and should be able to make a difference.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. It will give a lot of clarity to a lot of people. Surya Kumarji, if I could pose the same question to you, given that NABARD is the other major implementation agency besides SFAC. NCDC, I know, is a new player. They have a very steep learning curve, so I'm not counting them as a very major sort of player for the moment. But how does NABARD approach this whole partnership, because it is a partnership, with the institutions that are actually going to do the promotional and hand-holding work on the ground with FPOs?
Sir, I think number one, we have not yet advertised for the CBBO expression of interest. We sought some clarifications from Government of India. We just got them yesterday evening. Partial answers to the questions which we got. We would be going ahead and seeking expression of interest, number one. Number two, NCDC told us that they would like to work with us. That's what NCDC told us. They would like to work with us, and the advertisement which we do, they would select the CBBOs from the same thing. So we are still working out how do we go ahead with that. That is number two. Number three, from the beginning, we have been very clear. We have been telling in the meetings which were organized at the Government of India level that we would like to keep a redundancy in the CBBO level, in the sense for every state, we thought we should have around 2 to 3 CBBOs, so that one, there will be a competition. Two, in case someone falls, someone will pitch in, and then it'll go on. So this is what we wanted to do. And we are very, very clear, as ma'am just now said. I think CBBO is the most crucial organization which can make the program. And that is the reason why we want to spend so much time selecting the CBBOs carefully. In fact, we went ahead and told Government of India that we would like to use a slightly longish format to select the CBBOs, so that we don't want to make any error in judgment when we have such a big number asking to be enrolled as CBBOs. We want to be doubly careful, because we know that if the program has to succeed, the CBBO has to be in the right place. Once the CBBO is in place, obviously the NGOs which have experience doing the FPOs. We already work with around 4,600 like FPOs we have, and we are reasonably, all of them are working across the country. I'm sure like those NGOs would be working with the CBBOs once we select them. I wish, this is our wish, I wish some of the NGOs who worked at the POPI level, if some of them are big, they get selected as CBBOs. This is our wish. We really don't know how it will work. So we are looking forward. I think soon we'll go and advertise it, maybe in a couple of days. We are ready with the expression of interest, everything, except the clarification we sought from Government of India. Basically, we were looking at, to make it very clear to all the participants who are in the forum, we wanted to know how the costs have to be divided for the CBBO. We feel it is very crucial to know the bifurcation so that there is no point of difference between what we think and what the Government of India thinks. So, and since we ran several programs across the country several times, we don't want to get into any court cases and all such things. We are very, very clear on that. We have enough such mess we already have. So we wanted to be very clear, this is what is going to be the breakup, so that we play accordingly. Thank you.
Suresh Kumar ji, you got that clarification?
Yesterday evening, night, we got that.
Well, would you mind sharing that with us?
Oh, definitely.
Haven't started the process.
I will speak to you later. The clarification is not complete.
Just proceed. We'll get all clarifications as we go.
No more. Not like we wanted them to answer, so that we go ahead.
I have adopted that attitude for long. We learn along the way, and we do course corrections along the way.
You are very much part of the government. We are little away.
No, so long as we are transparent, we have scope to kind of take course correction methods.
Yeah.
Now this is both very heartening to see this candid admission. And this cross conversation, but it also is a little concerning, I'm sure, for many of the people who are listening to this conversation, because I think the role clarity just need not necessarily be at the apex level, at the implementation agency level, but the way it trickles down on the ground. And at this stage, I'm going to bring in my colleague Anish Kumar, who's a trustee of NAFPO, and I'm going to request him to please take the next part of the conversation forward, especially drawing in the experiences from closer to the ground and how these perspectives from the ground are observing these developments at the apex level, especially at the policy level, which we heard in the first part of the conversation. So over to you, Anish.
Thank you very much, sir. So one point, and this whole conversation lays such a good context for discussion with people working on ground. One point that you did mention, the FPO ecosystem differs from the cooperative ecosystem is its ability to bring in market players and ability to bring in CSOs as RIs in SFAC or POPs in the NABARD system. So there is a substantive difference that the FPO ecosystem brought in. So it is 10 years, and I wanted to, sir, also inform you on the NAFPO database itself. We have 9169 FPCs. So 10 years of FPCs, and almost we are there 10,000. So we are indeed looking at more than 20,000 FPOs coming in the picture. So I would like to invite Yogesh, who is anchoring the activities at the Madhya Bharat FPC, which is a federation of FPOs across Madhya Pradesh. So, and Yogesh, I request you to look at the 10K FPO as one peg. The other is the entire reforms, and you have actually started on ground procurement. The opening that was created with this reform, you have seized that, and on ground procurement have been started with a private company on ground. So if you were to reflect on together what this, your own journey with FPOs, you were one of the early ones on that. So if you were to reflect on that journey, how is it happening on ground? And if you were to educate all of us on ground, how are officials engaged on this issue of FPOs also, the new FPOs that are coming, how are, in the district officials engaged on that? And how is your support forthcoming from them as you build the procurement and other operations?
थैंक यू अनीस जी एंड सभी को नमस्कार। दो कॉन्टेस्ट है, एक तो जो अभी डिस्कशन जो हो रहा है उसमें बेसिकली जो नए एफपीओस की जिसमें बात हो रही, चूंकि वो डिस्कशन अभी हो रहा है उस पर हम थोड़ा सा अपनी बात रखना चाहेंगे। इनफैक्ट हम लोग मध्य प्रदेश में एफपीओस में 2005 से हम लोगों ने काम शुरू किया था और कुछ एफपीओस यहाँ पे बना था। सो 2005 से, और वो ग्राउंड लेवल पे एक वहाँ पे पंचायत मिस्ट्री का एक प्रोजेक्ट था जिसमें एफपीओस का काम शुरू किया गया था, एंड देन वो पायलट था, बट तो 2007 तक उसमें काम किए थे। उसमें से आउट ऑफ 14 एफपीओस 15 टोटल बना था, उसमें से 3 एफपीओ बंद हो गए, बट 12 एफपीओस आर स्टिल वर्किंग एंड सम ऑफ वर्किंग वेरी वेल एक्चुअली, उसमें काफी अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं। और उनके वो हमारे लिए एक है कि वाई दोज एफपीओस आर वर्किंग वेल एक्चुअली। उसमें 2-3 पैरामीटर हम लोगों ने जो बेसिकली कीज है, एक तो एचआर का है कि वेर एवर एचआर आर सस्टेन्ड एक्चुअली, जहां पे एचआर लंबे समय तक उसमें काम कर रहे हैं या उस लोकलाइज एरियाज के, मतलब आसपास के लोग हैं, प्रोफेशनल एग्रीकल्चर एग्री बिजनेस के बैकग्राउंड के, वो लोग लंबे समय तक अगर वहां पे काम किए हैं, सो दोज एफपीओ आर मोर स्टेबल। वो एफपीओ अच्छा काम किया कर रही है या अभी भी अच्छा बिजनेस कर रही है, अपने फार्मर्स को बेनिफिट दे पा रही है। और जहां पे एफपीओज में बाहर से कहीं एक्सोटिक या कोई एक्सटर्नल लोगों को रखा गया था या फिर बीच में ज्यादा एचआर में लोग आए गए और चले गए, वहां पे दिक्कत हुआ। तो ये एचआर का जो इश्यूज था उसमें एक बड़ा कॉन्टेक्स्ट। दूसरा जो है कि जो सपोर्ट सिस्टम था, जो प्रोजेक्ट में जो डीपीआईपी जो प्रोजेक्ट था उसमें जो सपोर्ट सिस्टम अवेलेबल था, जिसमें वर्किंग कैपिटल का एक 25 लाख का एक कैपिटल दिया गया था, सीड कैपिटल, जो कि बैंक में सीसी करके, उसमें बैंक में डिपॉजिट एफडी करके और उसके अगेंस्ट में सीसी लिया गया था। कई सारे एफपीओस का भी वो 1 करोड़ क्रॉस कर गया है। दैट अमाउंट इज नाउ इंक्रीज फ्रॉम 25 लाख टू मोर देन 1 करोड़। सो उस तरह का हुआ है और वो काफी काम है। इसके अलावा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में उनको सपोर्ट दिया गया, उनको आरकेवीवाई में सपोर्ट मिला था उन एफपीओस को, जो फर्स्ट जनरेशन है और प्रवेश सर थे उस समय एग्रीकल्चर सेक्रेटरी मध्य प्रदेश में। सो उनको कई सारे गवर्नमेंट से लिंकेजेस वगैरह मिल गए थे। सो दोज एफपीओज आर रियली, उनका आउटरीच काफी बड़ा है। मतलब one of the FPOs is having 4,600 farmers actually, 6,400 farmers, particular आगर डिस्ट्रिक्ट मध्य प्रदेश में है। और काफी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हुआ है लाइवलीहुड में फार्मर्स के। इनफैक्ट हमारे बोर्ड में भी वहां से लोग हैं किसान, जो काफी आज से 2003-4 में जब हम लोग देखते थे और आज वो किसी फोरम में जाकर के, और पूरा उनका इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट भी हुआ है, सोशल उसमें अपलिफ्टमेंट भी हुआ है। तो ये हमारे पास एग्जाम्पल है। अभी जो बात हो रहा है, जो मैम बोल रही थी एसएफएसी से जो मेन चैलेंजेस देखा गया, जो फर्स्ट हमारा जो एसएफएसी या जो 2010 के बाद जो एफपीओ मूवमेंट शुरू हुआ, ज्यादातर आरआईज जो आए, एनजीओज में 2 सेट ऑफ एनजीओज अलग कैटेगरीज था। कुछ एनजीओज ऐसे थे जिनके पास सोशल मोबिलाइजेशन तो ज्यादातर एनजीओज का या आरआईज का स्ट्रेंथ था, लेकिन जो बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट वाला जो इक्विपमेंट था उसमें कई सारे जो है हमारे जो आरआईज है वो लैग किया उन्होंने। तो जो एफपीओस जो आरआईज का वो दोनों विंग उनका स्ट्रांग था, वहां पे वो लोग ज्यादा एफपीओस को आगे ले गए हैं। कई सारे एनजीओस है जिन्होंने ऑलरेडी इस तरह का एक्यूमेंट, उनका इंटरनल एक्यूमेंट था, वहां पे ऑलरेडी एचआर उस तरह के लोग थे, या इस एस्पेक्ट में जो बेसिकली मार्केट लिंकेज और बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट इस तरह के वर्क में काम करते थे, तो वो था। लेकिन कई ज्यादातर देखा गया कि बहुत सारे, इनफैक्ट नाबार्ड में भी और एसएफएसी में भी बाद में कई सारे लोग आए कि अगर उनका जो सोशल मोबिलाइजेशन तो उन्होंने तो कर दिया, लेकिन एफपीओस के बाकी लिंकेज वगैरह प्रोवाइड नहीं किए। तो इस बार जो अभी यूआई आया हुआ है, जो मैम अभी बता रही थी, श्योरली इसमें इस तरह के चीजों को ध्यान में रखा गया है। लेकिन इसमें अभी जो बात हो रहा है, जो पैरामीटर है कि अभी जो एप्रीहेंशन भी इस तरह का है कि आपकी मार्केट में 2 तरह के ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है। एक तो है 3 तरह का, इनफैक्ट एक तो एनजीओज है जिन्होंने की सोशल मोबिलाइजेशन में काफी जो है मजबूत है, बट मार्केट लिंकेज या उस तरह की एक्सपर्टीज उनके पास नहीं है। दूसरा ग्रुप है जिनके पास मिक्स है, दोनों है, और जो कि काफी उन्होंने इस तरह के कोऑपरेटिव या एसएसजीज उनको मार्केट लिंकेज में इस तरह से काम किया है। तीसरा सेट जो अभी जो हमारा यूआई है उसमें हम एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं, जो इधर वो कॉर्पोरेट से है और या कि वो कंसल्टेंसी फर्म्स हैं बड़ी बड़ी, जिनके पास एचआर काफी स्ट्रांग है। लेकिन जो सबसे बड़ा इसमें जो अभी डिस्कशन है और सबसे बड़ा जो फियर है कि लोग जिनका कि ग्राउंड टच बिल्कुल नहीं है, ऐसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जो कि पैरामीटर में अगर वो आप उनको देखेंगे सो दे विल क्वालिफाई, उनका टर्नओवर, उनका एचआर का जो आपका दिखेगा, एकेडमिकली दे लुक्स वेरी स्ट्रांग, बट कितना वो ग्राउंड में परकोलेट हो पाएगा, वो जो एकेडमिक जो इंस्टीट्यूशन का जो नॉलेज है, वो एक बड़ा चैलेंज है, क्योंकि बहुत सारे ऐसे फर्म ऐसे देखा गया है कि वो एकेडमिक as a academician, as a professor, they are very good actually, but people when they are जिनको जब उनको ग्राउंड में लगाया गया, so how they are able to translate their knowledge into the ground results actually, ये एक बड़ा चैलेंज होगा। और इसमें हमें देखना है कि ये अगर उस तरह के इंस्टीट्यूशन है जिनका कि कोई सोशल मोबिलाइजेशन, सोशल पार्ट उनका काफी अगर वीक है, और वो तो उसमें जो एफपीओस के पूरे जो मॉडल है, बिकॉज इट्स अ मिक्स ऑफ सोशल और इकोनॉमिक, दोनों एस्पेक्ट को लेकर के हमें चलना है, तो इस पे हमें थोड़ा सा ध्यान रखने का।
योगेश जी, ये आपने बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट पॉइंट बोला है, खासकर जो एग्जोटिक आपने बोला है। और आई वाज आल्सो लुकिंग एट नंद कुमार जी वाज हियर एंड ही जस्ट लेफ्ट आवर वेबिनार. The point that he raised, how do we, and actually when sir you say that FPOs have to be allowed to dream big, it has to be a bottom-up process. In the article he did flag the challenges of the 10,000 FPOs and how we are looking at a structure which is not so bottom-up. The critical role of Poppy or RI there, and we have in Vriti who has played this role, and I guess, ma'am, the kind of expectation that you were laying out in terms of going beyond mobilization into market linkage and processing, they have played that role. And before I invite Bala from Vriti to share his, looking at the 10K FPO, your concerns, and also the opportunities that you look at the entire FPO opens up. But sir, Pravesh sir, I wanted to also say the 3 points that you asked both Madam and Suryakumar ji. The 3 points, long back, 10 years back, when we used to discuss about FPOs, used to be around the business model. What is the business design of a collective? That is one. The second, we talked about human resources, and the third, we talked about the governance, because willy-nilly, you will always have information and capability asymmetry there. And we talked about these 3 key challenges of FPOs. In some ways, when we are coming up with this framework, and the role of RI would become very critical. So I'd like Bala to reflect on these, and also, in a positive way, lay out the opportunity that the new regime of FPOs present to us.
Yeah, thank you, Anish, and thanks NAFPO, and thank you, Madam, and also Suryakumar ji and Parvesh ji. I think all of us, the Farmers Producer Organization, which has been, I think 2010-11, which we started, part of SFAC pilot journey. I think it has given a confidence. I think that's why we are talking about today 10,000 Farmers Producer Organization. How do we make it successful? Yeah, and we are already 10,000. We have. I think then we are believing in. I think this is adding and contributing and creating impact for the farmers. I think there is no doubt about it. I think collectives, which is bringing that impact to the farmers, there is no doubt about it. I think I agree with, there are many points which is shared by Madam and also the Suryakumar ji and also others here, which I feel one is about which we have started as a RI or Poppy, which we have been working. I think one, we feel how these RIs and Poppies, which is locally and long-term approach, which is very much required. It should not be looked at as about a project, because that what has happened after some point in time when it is withdrawn. I think how are we going to actually support these farmers producer organizations? This being left in the middle of the road, I think they don't know how to actually take it forward. There are organizations, there are isolated success, individually they have been working, but there should be a thinking on how these farmers producer organizations in the long term, because today, which we are seeing it like, which is Amul, which we have been saying, why is it being successful? If you see, keep on bringing in the change within the organization and the innovation is keep on happening. But how that will happen in this 10,000 farmers producer organization as well in the long run? Yeah, I think that's not very, very clear, which is about now we have 3-year roadmap, 5-year roadmap. Beyond that, how this organization can stand alone, withstand, and kind of face whatever the challenge happens in the ecosystem, and that creates continuously impact to the members. Yeah, that I think one which needs to be looked at. The second, I think marketing. What is happening is about, I think overall, as I think Madam also said, I think all of us, we tried we have been doing, and we are able to create some kind of impact at different levels. But if you have to keep it and do that impact at the larger scale, how are we actually all of us coming together and create? I think each of the organization also trying to be capturing the value chain, trying to value add and make their own brands. I don't think so it is possible by each of the organization doing it on its own. I think it is required some level of aggregation and at the different levels. It's not maybe district, it may be state, but how that kind of support, it's not only branding, but how the farmers producer organization can be aggregated at different levels, the marketing related support and the value addition related support. It's not only a branding, but how do you supply to the bigger corporates? You don't need to be taking that risk in the supply chain and the value chain. Yeah, I think one needs to be looked at that. The third, I think for all these which we feel, I think Anis also will raise a very important point, which is about the professional support. What is the mechanism which we create continuously? The role of facilitating or incubating organization, it changes over a period of time, and they keep mentoring these farmers producer organizations, very, very important. Yeah, because it's initially a social mobilization, you strengthen all the systems, but parallelly also you work on low hanging, but when you move up and then over a period of time, you actually take and then risk taking games as well. Yeah, how do you do it? I think there it's again, we need to look at HR, pool of HR, the professional support which is required beyond the project period as well. And very, very important, when we look at technology, I think technology plays a crucial role. I think all of us today, I think it's so many of us virtually meeting. It may be sometimes impossible to do it in a conference, maybe in Delhi or in Bombay. I think technology can play a very, very important role for bringing in real-time information. And also, how do we use the scale thinking? I think, which today people are talking about, I think Nandan Nilekani organization are talking about, how do we look at societal platforms? How do you do something capacity building? We don't need an expert every time going and doing the training program. Can you do it in bite size where farmers producer organization can learn how to conduct a board meeting, or how do I file a written, or how do I how do I file a like CEO if it is resigned? Yeah, how do we bring in this at the larger scale where all the three organizations in the country, which is maybe NABARD, SFAC, and NCDC, how does this kind of systems are built and it is available for a common good? Then you are able to actually bring in these aspects for impact at the scale. The third, I think I see these three reforms in the country recently. I think we as organization, we believe, I think these giving opportunity for farmers producer organization. As a farmer may be a difficult, because we have intermediate organization like farmers producer organization, how it can actually help the farmers to go into the market without the boundary. Yeah, but there again, I think it's very early, but with the optimism that how facilitating organizations can make it work for the farmers producer organization and for the farmers. I think that is the responsibility of also the facilitating organization. That's how I look at it. And the contract farming, yeah, which includes the contract farming and then essential commodity acts. I think these are all we see it's a enabling factor which is currently for the 10,000 farmers producer organization. And also what is there already, it's about, as Anis was saying, the database 9,200 or so. I think how do we leverage this? I think it is the responsibility of facilitating organization. How do we help each of the farmers producer organization to leverage? And one more
Absolutely.
one more I want to say it here on, which is about, I think, which we are looking at access to finance. I don't think so. It is only finance will, access to finance alone, it will help. I think it required a combination of services when it is also facilitated finance. I want to quote an example where it's a SIDBI started supporting.
Can we, Bala, may I suggest that because we have,
Sure.
DMD NABARD also there. So let's take this to them, and I'll like to go back to Pravesh to consolidate. But excellent points, Bala, that you made across, and the case that you presented for RIs with local roots and having that market presence, and particularly the point that you make after the CBOs what. So if I was doing back of the envelope calculation there and looking at the annual support that one is extending to CBBOs, and let's see what kind of turnovers are required for the FPOs to meet those costs. So we'll see that, many FPOs out of these 10,000 odd we are talking about, very few, and in double digits only will be able to match up to those turnovers. Sir, over to you. And I would, as I, hand it over to you, sir, I have 2 points, questions, if you could, and also, one is, sir, related to your own engagement, sir, with PPIAD, where you frankly solved this whole issue of market at SFAC. You had led that, sir. So what opportunities we see this kind of a PPIAD kind of a engagement in the new regime? And the second is, sir, how do we engender the entire FPO movement? And particularly when you are looking at the 10,000 FPO, we looked at the entire operating guidelines very carefully and looked at both at the NPMA, CBBO, and the FPO level, the guidelines. And there are quite a number of spaces where, with little bit of fine tuning, we can make it a more women-friendly movement. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Anish. You have anticipated my alighting on the gender point, which I would have taken up, and I'm alerting Neelkamal, I'm going to come to her. But before I do that, I wanted to rope in Surya Kumar to go a little beyond this project approach and share with us what are the thoughts of an organization like NABARD at the larger sector support. I recall that the MFI sector, which was also kick-started through a series of projects, and I know that as a field officer, you did some outstanding work in MRCP, the Maharashtra Rural Credit Project, which in a sense was the forerunner of a pan-India expansion of the SHG bank linkage approach. And NABARD did a lot of sector development work, which included a lot of HR, and HR issues have been flagged as one of the main areas of concern. A lot of the rating tools that were developed. So you did a lot of work both at the, you meaning NABARD did a lot of work in developing norms, in developing guidelines, and in actually piloting a number of solutions to address challenges in HR, in rating, in helping to build the awareness among the banking sector. Now, NABARD has been involved in FPO building also, at least if not as long as SFAC, at least for the last 5-6 years intensively. Do you see a role for NABARD now, maybe collaborating with the others and also a much larger coalition to address some of these larger structural deficits? Your thoughts, please.
Yes, sir. I think first and foremost, we are very clear that we can't and we don't want to work alone in this area as compared to what we did in the SHG program. It is a historical thing because we were the first to initiate the whole idea way back in 1992 and did all these things. Now we are very clear that many people have a reasonable amount of understanding and reasonable amount of success of the FPO across the country. Number two, we are very clear that capacity building is the most important thing. Like say, for example, AP Mass has done a good amount of work. some other people have done a good amount of work. I think I was in our training institute, Bird, Lucknow. I was asking them that they should sit tight, call 4 or 5, like the key people involved in this, and sort out all the modules which they have, and say which one we would be finally selecting. Like you have a syllabus for a 10th class or 11th class, NCERT does. I think some people need to sit and say, for this, we need to have 5 modules, and each module will have what you call 7, 8 sessions, and these things will be the best material available. That's what I told my colleagues in BERT very recently, and I asked them to what you call, in a situation, in a thing like that, having a physical meeting would be better. I asked them they should call in small lots of people to Lucknow, and they should sit down and sort it out, because capacity building is the most important thing. And GIZ is working with us. They also did some modules, like we want them to be a part of that. That is number one. And number two, I think once we get this, right now the capacity building part and the module part look little formidable because of so many things floating around. I personally believe, and all my colleagues in my office in Bombay believe, that we need to say, this is what we're going to do. And I want that uniformity across all the players, so that one will not say, I have a better module than you. No, it is not the question of I. It is the question of only we, otherwise we will not go anywhere. I believe 10,000 FPO thing, we can do it just like that, if we put things together. So number two, I think I spoke to some people. How do we really train the CEOs beyond this capacity building? Normal modules is something which requires some serious thinking. I spoke to some people. We are ready even to put some monies on that, but committing how long the programs should be for a CEO and who is going to spare them, all these things are coming. So we need to have a slightly long-term capacity building program for the CEOs. Incidentally, while this is completely away from what we are discussing now, personally I had an experience when I was working in Calcutta between 2009-12. NABARD, Ramakrishna Mission and United Bank of India used to have a very fantastic arrangement where we would divide the cost between Ramakrishna Mission, NABARD and UBI. We would select around 50 to 60 10th class and 12th class, what to call pass or dropouts, and invest money in them on virtually every aspect of rural development, so that he will become a, he'll become an entrepreneur. He could do artificial insemination, he could do fish keeping, he could do anything. So we have invested in them and it really worked fine. We need to do something for the CEOs of this nature. This is one more thing which we are looking at. Once these two things are in place, bankers will come on board only when there is a persistent talking. We would be doing that at all possible fora, and we would also be requesting Government of India through the DFS to give an advisory to the banks. I personally wrote a letter to the Reserve Bank of India, and Reserve Bank of India, based on the 18-17 page note which we sent to them, have given an advisory to the IBA and to the banks recently, around 15-20 days back. So we will be handling that. I think capacity building modules, capacity building to the CEOs, and capacity building to the bankers. I think bankers do not really require a great amount of training program. They require constant persuasion to really look at this sector. This is what I'm thinking for the sector development in the coming 1 year as I look forward. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Suryakumar. This is very comprehensive, very encouraging, and even if you can roll out, 70-80% of this, I think it will be hugely contributing to the strengthening of the sector. Nilkamal, if I could have your thoughts, this is a point which I wanted to also raise, and Anish has, thank you Anish for flagging it. One of the things that we learned in the early part of the FPO development phase was that typically two major observations, in fact, from the first 5-year period that I can certainly recall. One, that the majority of participants, members of FPOs, tended to be small and marginal farmers. And that was a hugely satisfying and encouraging development. And it showed that this collective actually addressed the challenges that many of these people faced as individual cultivators. But this, at the same time, there was also a learning that the participation of women in these FPOs was minimal. We, of course, had more than a dozen plus FPOs by the time I left SFAC in 2015, which were all women FPOs. But for some reason, we've not been able to find a policy response to encourage more female cultivators. And we all know, it need not be repeated in this forum, the importance of women in agriculture. But their participation in these key collectives has still not reached a stage which would, I think, be satisfying any of us. So any thoughts on how this deficit could be addressed in the coming new project? Your mic is on mute, Nilkamal.
So I was saying that I have similar concerns, and my observations match yours, that there is very minimal participation of women. But I have also met some very low key but very powerful and very successful women entrepreneurs who are into the business of FPOs. All of them are south of Vindhyas. So I haven't really met many from the northern belt who would be having some claim to effective and meaningful organizations. The lesson that I learned from these women FPOs that I met was, one, primarily it's education and awareness. I mean, while any number of farmers who are semi-literate and semi-educated and are male may work, but somewhere where it comes to women, there is a level which is certainly higher in terms of awareness and education, and then only they are able to take that leap into the world of business. So, for example, this FPO came from, I think it was Maharashtra, or was it in Karnataka? And it's an all-women FPO, and they have a BA-MS doctor, that is a Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine Sciences. She is the CEO, and she's the Karta Dharta of this FPO, everything she's managing. And for her, drive came from medicinal plants, because she was qualified to be an Ayurveda doctor. So I'm thinking that, so if we were to match the clusters profile in terms of women's education and capture some of the leadership from the women's community in those clusters, then perhaps we would find a greater role for women. But left alone to themselves and, expecting the FPOs to bring in more farmer members or to bring in more women farmers as CEOs or as qualified personnel to man the FPO business would be a little difficult. Left to itself. It's not impossible, but it will be a little difficult. So we have to have a targeted approach. We have to have a more mapping kind of a scenario where we can really pick up the cream. You were mentioning just now about having found some women from, who were saying about identifying people who have dropped out of school and then capturing whatever skills they have acquired and harnessing those energies into something gainful. So that is something which is coming out of my learnings with the self-help groups in Rajasthan, little work which I did in that region. And everybody knows, and NABARD particularly knows, the kind of work which the self-help groups of women have done in terms of making, microfinance available to them and institutionalizing that flow. It doesn't end with that particular group. So I think there are learnings to be made from that. And I am actually hoping that I forgot to mention earlier about the role that the National Project Management Agency will do. We are in the process of finalizing the selection of the NPMA. And once that is finalized, it will be providing all kinds of, I wouldn't say solutions, but leadership it will provide to us in terms of designing programs that would attract more women to come into it, not just through membership of FPOs, but actually taking on leadership roles. And I would say that this entire approach towards having more and more women farmers into this will vary from cluster to cluster, commodity to commodity, state to state even. And while I'm expecting better results from some of the southern states, the north will be a little difficult, but not impossible, and we have to play a more focused role over there. Uh, in my earlier role in government of Rajasthan, what we had experimented with, and again this is a learning, is in terms of giving nurseries to women for cultivation, for raising plants and saplings. And they came up with some brilliant results. I mean, it was still in its nascent stage when I left, but giving women a priority in allotment of nursery funds under the National Horticulture Mission was a very big deal. Then also in terms of the custom hiring centers, because they showed a kind of business acumen which was difficult to envisage on its own. So there are what I realized was that it was being done typically, you are catching the low hanging fruits. So you go into areas, you go into commodities, you go into clusters where you have some groundwork already laid out. So supposing in let's say for example in Ajmer, if there has been some self-help groups for women who have been doing good work, I would like to start experimenting with that area, creating FPOs in those areas which are all women, or at least all women leadership, the entire CEO structure around him, the accounts people, the marketing people, whatever you have, 3-4 that are envisaged in the system, or even the active members of the FPO, they are women. So I would really, my strategy would be to go for the low hanging fruits where some work has been already done in terms of awareness, literacy, self-help groups, and health workers, the ASHA network which you have, the Anganwadi network that you have. So उनको लेकर के अगर हम build करेंगे from the success stories of those areas, then I think we have a better chance of making this move into it. With financing, I particularly feel that more and more as the other reforms keep coming in, like ownership of land to women, and the more and more mutations that keep pending for years because there is lack of clarity or rather lack of intent within the revenue machinery of entering mutations in the name of women. Once those things start getting resolved by and by, things will change for the women. I am not expecting earth-shattering kind of results in the first years, but yes, small baby steps need to be taken in a focused and conscious manner, deliberate, conscious efforts to handle this issue. Leaving it to happen on its own is not going to work.
Thank you so much, Nilkamal. This is so encouraging. Number one, your candid acknowledgement of the problem, of a challenge. I would not call it a problem. It's not something that you have created. It's a societal and larger socioeconomic issue. But I'm so happy and encouraged to hear your thoughts on this. And I'm sure that the fact that you see this as a deficit that needs to be addressed, we can certainly, I think, move towards at least an improvement of this in the next 3 to 4 years. I would like to share with you, in fact, that some very good work has been done by several organizations. Anish, who's here with me, he's been working on a poultry collective. In fact, it's the largest poultry collective, 100% run by women, with a turnover of more than 600 crores before the COVID struck. And of course, this is a challenging period. They have developed some excellent strategies to mainstream the role of women in governance structures, in economic decision making. And if you think that this would be a feasibility, and I'm also making this offer to Suryakumarji for NABARD, that we could look at a long-term engagement once the NPMA is in place. And I know that the operational guidelines provide the flexibility to devise strategies to address specific challenges. So this is one, I think, area that we would love to work with you, both of you, both on the skilling side. Suryakumar mentioned an excellent approach where rural youth, and in fact, our experience is also that wherever, and Yogesh endorsed this earlier in his intervention, that wherever the leadership of the CEO, like the CEO, is from the local milieu, his understanding of the local cultural context, the economic context, leads to successful outcomes in the CEO, in the FPO. So we could work on 2 or 3 of these themes, and NAFPO would help to collate the experience of other civil society organizations in its network and also outside the network, and bring them to NABARD and SFAC for wider adoption. So thank you so much for this.
Sir, one observation here, while we would be happy to work with you certainly on this, as far as the women, prioritizing women in the FPOs, as ma'am said, like in Karnataka, I have seen many FPOs which are completely banned by women. We would not...
The use of the word manned has to go now, Suryakumarji.
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. What I'm saying is we will wait for a while. I want the program to kick off and spend some time on the ground. Then we bring this in. Say, for example, in specific, where there, as a poultry example you said, in dairy, it would be much more easier as compared to crops, which are typically the forte of the menfolk around in the villages. We must really consciously bring this in. We would bring this in. My only request is we should bring this in after a while when the program kicks off. Then we can, by then we would have really put across how the CBBO works, how things will work. Then we will push this in the second year onwards. We can really push this in from the second year onwards, and we can make it, some part we can make it even mandatory. But we will wait till the first year really begins, which is not even begun till now.
Sure, Suryakumar, timing, of course, is a, it's an opportunity issue, and I think some background work can happen, but of course the agencies have to decide when they want to, intervene on the ground. Completely with you, and that autonomy will of course remain with the two organizations. Now, of course, as I had anticipated, time has flown despite the huge number of issues that I would have loved to raise, and I see that the participants have been equally keenly listening to both you and the panelists. There are a flood of questions which obviously we can't take up. But before we close, in deference to the enthusiasm of the audience, I'm just going to raise one issue and request both of you to very quickly respond. And that's an issue which I also faced, but I'll have to be honest that it was not something that we could solve, at least in the first phase. And that is the role of state governments. Without the cooperation of the state governments, the work on the ground, whether it's done by the partner organization or even the FPO's own work after formation, cannot really take off. Are there any thoughts, both in SFAC and NABARD, on addressing or enlisting the support and cooperation of the state governments? If Suryakumarji, you could go first, and then Neelkamal will.
Yeah. I can talk my immediate experience in Karnataka, I think, which I was there till very recently. The government of Karnataka is extremely keen to be a part of the whole program, and same is the case with government of Andhra Pradesh and government of what they call Telangana and Tamil Nadu even. Unless until the state governments really want to get into it, we can't really. The government of Karnataka, for example, showed some interest. In fact, I personally discussed with the CS, saying that, sir, in your policy, this thing should be changed. And immediately CS agreed. And then because the CS and the ACS were very clear that we need to be involved in it. If he were to be completely what you call non-committal on that, obviously I could have not done anything despite my talking and doing. So it all depends upon how do they really look at this. I also heard some feedback from some of my colleagues across the country. Some of the governments are saying, oh, this is not my program, this is Government of India's program. So why should I really push myself? Then I told my colleagues, you tell them that we are working in your state for your people. We are not bringing people from somewhere else. I think they cannot simply say that it is not my. Why should I do this? Some element of Government of India talking. I don't know how it will really help, but some so-called the enlightened self-interest could help governments play a very active role. I will give you a corollary. Many state governments don't think that they should do anything for the Kisan credit card even now. This is absolutely nonsense. In fact, I told many places. In fact, I wrote an article at some point of time. I told some people, senior people in the DFS, that, sir, you should tell the state governments that they should be a part of this KCC drive. If they think I'm not part of it, it's a bank's job. For a very fundamental thing like Kisan Credit Card, when we're talking about what you call bringing synchrony between PM Kisan and KCC, asking some of those state governments who are not very keen to work on the FPO is a tall order. But if the state governments don't come in, honestly, so many things will stop. Just now in the interview, we were selecting from morning till now. Some of the people I told government of a particular government, I would not like to name, they said you should give 10% of the places in the APMC to the FPOs. The government really listened, and in the APMC, they're given place for the FPOs. So it all depends upon how the government is responsive, but government should really own this up.
Thank you. That's very, I think, very clear, and I think absolutely spot on. Nilkamal, your thoughts on this?
Well, actually, the state governments have a role in this, or they already have a role. Through the various committees which have been created, there is a district level committee to be headed by the collector, where the NABARD regional manager is the member secretary. And they have to, of course, it's an advisory role, but I think it would be an evolving role. So you begin with that advisory services that they provide, the advisory expertise that they provide, because they have a better grip on the district than we in Delhi could have, or even the state level CBBO could have. So I think there is a role which is envisaged for the state. Looks minimal at the moment, but that was perhaps deliberate because we were trying to push it, and sometimes these things get caught in the rigmarole of a state government's working. So once it gets going, I think the role of the state government vis-a-vis the implementation aspects of the FPO program would evolve, change, and magnify also at some point of time. What is really required at the moment is the convergence. I often think in terms of convergence, because so many schemes are running for the farmers' welfare. You know, whether it is the Agriculture Ministry's programs, or it is the Animal Husbandry Department's program, or even the rural management and the livelihood and the skill. If through the mechanism of the state government, we can create some sort of a convergence for all these schemes within the FPO, and in the last meeting of the NPMA FSC, I have said that perhaps what needs to be done is that wherever in whichever beneficiary scheme the word farmer is used, it should be slashed with an FPO. It has not yet been done. Even within the Agriculture Ministry, there are still gaps. A lot has been done, but there are still gaps where we need to create that. And the oversight on this, the kind of allocation of targets for the FPOs in the existing schemes, which are the centrally sponsored schemes, which are 60-40 or 70-30 ratios mein jo bati hui hain, would actually lie with the state government. The whole convergence would happen. So if you are targeting an FPO for financing and marketing and what have you, then also soil testing, for example, or seed cultivation or seed distribution program, or even micro irrigation and custom hiring. So all of these things will start mattering, and the state government can actually bulldoze into the FPO program through convergence. This is my thinking. But of course, it depends on the priorities that the state government will have. And typically the central government would have limited role to play in creating priorities for the state government. But if I can read the writing on the wall, I think that's going to happen, because more and more challenges have come up before the agriculture thing, in terms of being a very protected and a very, how do I say, a kind of straight-jacketed system, which we have now. It's been freed up, it's liberalized really. And more such liberal measures will fall in place. So I think therefore the state government will play a very big role in creating convergence through the FPOs for multiplicity of programs that run for the benefit of the farmers.
That's such a positive note to close this dialogue, because I'm very, very encouraged to hear your insights on this, and your thoughts and your clarity on the role of the states, which once at the apex level, if this is the thinking, I'm sure mechanisms can be found to rope them in. And you're quite right, both of you, that without their active involvement, this next phase of the FPO development, ecosystem development is not going to happen, because now we are into the next generation issues, as it were. We've, in a sense, found if not complete, but partial solutions to most of the first generation challenges. But this next generation movement has to involve the state governments. And I'm afraid this is the point on which I must very reluctantly stop, even though I think we can go on for at least another hour easily. There's such richness of experience that both of you have brought, as well as the rest of our panel. And I'm going to request Anish to round it off with a quick vote of thanks.
I'll have to be very quick. We are already ahead of time. Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you very much, Surya Kumarji. Between, as you said about NDCC, between two of you, we have the entire 10K FPO leadership here, and you could spare this time with the stakeholders in the FPO ecosystem is very heartening, and we are very grateful for the wealth of issues that you discussed. And thank you very much, Pravesh sir, for bringing in these range of issues. We discussed about all those right from the top 5 concerns of FPOs to CBOs, CBBOs role at length, to gender, to role of a state government. And given that the leadership is so, as you rightly said, sir, so proactive and so connected to the issues, the next decade of FPOs would be, as bright as the first decade was. So we are looking forward to working together with the entire ecosystem, sir. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, the panelists and the participants.
Thank you all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.